Sukihantu and good evening to ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Dhamma Dana series brought to you by Buddhist Mahavihara Malaysia. Today's session is also live on TBC and Facebook. Do subscribe our Facebook for more information. The topic for tonight is How to See Buddha Part 5 by Dr. Gamini from UK. I believe Dr. Gamini is no stranger to all of us here. We are apologize for the delay for tonight. So just let me give a very brief background of Dr. Gamini. He comes from a very respectable family, a very brilliant student, excel in studies and also in sports. He is now a consultant physician, but he dedicates his life in conducting talks and discussion on Buddha Dharma, where he promotes the original Buddha doctrine. Dr. Gamini does everything not as a profession, neither for any peculiar reason. He dedicates his life in spreading the truth without charging fee or expecting any remuneration. Without further ado, let's invite Dr. Gamini to join us. Good evening, Dr. Gamini, and welcome. Over to you now.
Good evening, everybody. I'm sorry we are a bit late trying to get a better computer and a better picture and maybe better sound as well, but that didn't work. So we had to come back to the old system. And so today, uh, the discussion I promised last time, we'll do a lot of discussion about the practical aspects of how to see Buddha. Now, before you move on to practical aspect, you have to prepare yourself how to get into this system, because you are now dealing with a system called mind, which has totally submerged or masked the system of prajna, which sees Dhamma and Buddha. So they are all lying within inside your body, but they are unable to expose themselves or free themselves to come out and see Dhamma and Buddha. They are hidden by the system called the mind, and the mind, memory, and the sense organs axis completely covers the system of prajna. So one has to prepare to enable this system of prajna to emerge from inside. And remember, everything that you come to see come from inside. And that's why it's a well-known phrase in Buddhist circles called Pacchattam Veditabbo. Pacchattam means from within. Veditabbo means that is how you should get to know or get to see. This Vedi means knowing. Uh, so it has to come from within. It has to emerge from within. So the systems that cover it, the the mind, memory, and the sense organ axis, is completely submerging this eye of prajna and Buddha and Dhamma. They all lie within yourself, and you have two components, as I said in the last discussion, that your body that we see and feel is made of two spaces, independently, functionally, two different spaces, although they are lying within the same space as we perceive it. Functionally, we can actually categorize into two spaces, and with the third space binding these two spaces. So the first space is the mind, the other space, or called loka in Buddhist circles, is the body, physical body, and the third one is the one that binds these two parts together, and that is called tanha. And Body and the mind, they are made of tiny little particles that your sense organs have no access to. They cannot see, they are not powerful enough to see them. They arise and cease all the time. And the speed of the arising and ceasing in the mind is much higher than the speed of light. So, therefore, any of our sense organs are unable to perceive the actual functioning of the mind. But whereas the body, the speed of this arising and ceasing is much below the level of speed of light, and therefore we can touch and feel and see as a person or as a as a physical body. So these two are made of ultimately of the same thing, although the speeds are different. But the third space is made of just as an attraction, like two magnets together. What is in between? There are no particles or anything that arises and ceases in that space. So these three spaces are together, and as long as impulses come or images come to the sense organs, to the mind, it passes on to the mind because there's a bridge in between, which is called the tanha, the attraction. And then the mind asks the memory what the picture that fell on the mind, and then it recognizes it and sends a message to the mind, oh, this is a tree or this is a chair. And then the notion of a thought arises in your mind. And that thought, I said last time, it consists of three main parts. That is the simplest thought, has three main parts. And that's first is the object you saw or touched or heard, and then whether you heard it or saw it or touched it. And third component is me. It is I who saw it. So if you say I saw a chair, and those are the three things. There's I always in every thought, because always the way you remember, put anything in your memory is linking uh, Rupa, which is an object, with a name called Nama, and then these are linked together by me or I, which becomes then your knowledge in your memory. So every time a thought happens in the mind, the notion of me or I is always there. Now, this is very important. I'm mentioning it over and over again because it's so important in the practical terms. Because in the practical terms, the body, physical body, knows what the mind has done. So if you have a notion, very strong notion called me within you, the physical body knows it. And then the attraction gets even firmer so that you will not be able to separate this attraction, separate the body and the mind by neutralizing this attraction, so that the eye of prajna emerges to see Dhamma and Buddha. So if you have strong feelings about me or I within you, then it becomes difficult for the eye of prajna to open up, because it becomes difficult for the tanha or the attraction to be neutralized, because this attraction is made of the notions, the ideas you have. They are called sankalpa in Buddhist terms, and these are when you come to know something, and then if you think you know, then the tanha becomes stronger. If you think you know, because you put it in the memory as your knowledge, and the moment you put it in the memory as your knowledge, particularly relating to me, and this is where the religions come in. All religions assume that there's a person called me, and they all explain or tell us how to behave, so that they give you an end point so that you will either join with the Brahman or join with the Atman, or in some of these Buddhism circles, uh, they think you will go to heaven if you behave well and do good. But if you have that kind of a notion, that binds your tanha because it is relating to me. So anything relating to me is strongly found within you. You find it difficult for this practice to go on and finally achieve success. So this is why I explained in the last few discussions how important is to get away from the notion of me, which means you have to get away from the religions which tell us that there is a person called me and then that person should behave like that. Now remember, in the religion called Buddhism, we have alms giving and then observing precepts and then meditation. They are all done through your mind, and therefore they all strengthen. Unfortunately, although they say that it weakens, but actually it strengthens, because every time you promise to not to do something or promise to do something, then it becomes your promise, and then tanha becomes stronger. So the body and the mind is even bound together more firmly, so that it becomes difficult to separate. Now, this is why I explained the difference between religion and seeing in the previous discussions. So it is very important to get away from the notion of me, which means you have to get away from the notion of observing a particular religion, whether it's Buddhist or Islam or Christianity or whatever. These all related to a person called me. But here we are going to find out that there is no person called me. Actually, what we thought before through the mind, that there was a person, but in fact, that person's picture or the image that you perceive was an illusion created in the mind. Actually, what happens within you is that these little particles arise and cease all the time, and when they conglomerate, you perceive them as different things. Say, for example, when tiniest particles get together, say thousands, hundreds of thousand particles get together, it forms light. And further particles get together, it can form sound and then touch like that. And then finally, when they get together, it may form an eye. You will perceive it as an eye or a nose or mouth or a body or arm. So they are all finally, ultimately, made of these tiny particles that arise and cease. So if the eye of prajna to see these tiniest particles, you got to neutralize or destroy that attraction between the body and the mind, because as long as that attraction remains, what happens is the impulses come through the sense organs and the mind becomes active, mind awakens, mind wakes up, and that's what we call vijnana. And after that, through vijnana, through that waking up process in the mind, everything is done. So the uh, alms giving, meditation, and observing precepts, all done through vijnana, the wakefulness of the mind. And that prevents the eye of prajna, because that strengthens the bond between the body and the mind. So as long as you wake up through your mind, wake up through vijnana, you fall onto the wrong side. You will not be able to get to the other side. So what we have to do is to prevent this vijnana arising and be awake through a different system. Ultimately, you have to wake through the eye of prajna. But we cannot go from vijnana, wakefulness of the mind, to wakefulness of prajna. So what we have to do is to come to a stage in between prajna and mind, and that is called chitta. Chitta's wakefulness, the basis of it, is completely different to wakefulness of the mind. Now, this is important to know because in your path, practice towards the seeing Nibbana, you need to know the stage in between prajna and vijnana. Because from that stage only you have to listen to the truth to move on to the next stage of prajna. This is through the listening process if one attains to Nibbana. Now remember, to see Nibbana, to see Buddha and Dhamma, there are two ways. First, you can do it on your own. Second, you can listen to somebody talking about Buddha and Dhamma. And if you, while listening to the Buddha and Dhamma, if you listen through Vijnana, then the tanha becomes even more bound. It becomes stronger. So this is the question that you have to ask yourself. If you listen through your mind and understand through your mind, it becomes worse. You will not be able to get to the other side. So the essence is that you have to listen but be awake through a different system, not through the mind, and that is without thinking. The moment you relinquish the mind or you move away from the mind, which is ultimately we call Cheto Vimukti, also known as Chinto Vimukti. That means Chintanaya means the thought. So Vimukti means release from. So one has to stop thinking, which we normally do through the mind by being awake through Vijnana, to be on to the next stage of chitta. And from the stage of chitta, then you move on to prajna while listening to the truth without a thought. So there are two complications here. One might ask, how can you listen to something without thinking? Well, I'll tell you, there are ways of doing that. And before that, we must know how to get there, how to be awake through chitta. And that wakefulness is the opposite of vijnana, which we call jnana. Now, in Buddhist circles, in Buddhism, jnana is defined as knowledge. That is not the correct version, and that is not the way I saw it. And I'm uh, trying to explain this to you after seeing Nibbana. Once you see Nibbana, once you open your eye of prajna, the prajna tells you a lot of uh, processes that happen within the body when you wake through the mind. And that's the knowledge that you get from prajna after opening the eye of prajna. So it tells you that jnana is not knowledge. Jnana is how one can be awake through chitta. Because the opposite of that is vijnana, when you are awake through the mind. Right now, when the body wants to release the eye of prajna from the clench of the mind, memory, and the tanha axis, the system, it has to destroy the attraction between the body and the mind, which is tanha. Now, tanha is defined in Buddhism as craving to external things. Now, this Buddha message, we don't talk anything about external. Everything is within you, your knowledge, Buddha, Dhamma, Prajna, everything is within you. So, this word tanha has also been misinterpreted in the Buddhist circles, because you will know once the eye of prajna opens up what tanha is. At once, immediately, you will know what it is. So the important thing is, if you were to get rid of tanha or completely destroy or neutralize tanha or weaken it, at least at the beginning, you need to stop thoughts, because thoughts are the nourishment of tanha. Thoughts are the ones that ultimately go to form tanha. The tanha, the attraction, arises, is made of your thoughts, but it manifests in a different way by being an attraction between the body and the mind. So if you have to destroy your tanha, you will now realize that you have to get rid of all the thoughts and get rid of all the thoughts in the memory as well. And then that is going to be difficult. But if you can do it, particularly the ones relating to me, they are almost everything in a religion. So that's why I said you have to completely come out of religion, because then you come out of the notion of me. At least majority part of your memory consists of strong notion of me through religions. And if you can get rid of that, and if you were to get rid of all the memory you have for a moment, then the tanha becomes neutralized and the body and the mind separates, and the eye of prajna opens up and you see Buddha and Dhamma. And that is how you do it on your own. But there is another way, second way, which is actually found in the Theravada system. The Theravada system, it's by listening to the truth as said by somebody else who have seen Nibbana before. In the Mahayana side, it is done through your own efforts without listening to the truth at the time you see Nibbana. You can always find out from somebody else how to go in this path, but you have to do it on your own. And there's no listening involved in the Mahayana process. That is how you do it yourself on your own. Now we are discussing today the second system, how you could do that by listening to somebody telling the truth. And and that listening process should not be through the mind, as I said at the beginning, because if you listen through the mind, then the tanha strengthens and it binds body and the mind together even more firmly. So there's a fallacy there. There's a system that you have to go through very precisely, and it is simple but very precise. If you go through that system, then you will destroy tanha in the body and the mind will separate off and the your prajna will open. How long does this take? Moment. Just next moment you can achieve this, and that is what is called samyiktiko. Here and now, almost immediate. So preparation is so important for this. Previously, you should have got rid of all these religious ideas, strong notion of me, and in your day-to-day life, you should not have strong feelings about anything. Basically, you take it as it comes, and also try and not go back to the past. If you go back to the past, as we do every moment when you go through the mind, because when you go through the mind, you have to go to the past to extract something from the memory to identify that object or to understand what is being said by somebody else. So if you go back to the past, your memory is strengthened, and also a new thought arises, and that strengthens your tanha, so that you will fail in your mission to see Buddha. So you see the reason why I've been explaining the same thing over and over and over again, because it's so important to prepare yourself to start with. It is not difficult. There are a lot of people now in Sri Lanka alone. More than 500, 600 people have achieved the seeing Buddha. And by doing that, it is not difficult, it can be done. And it is the effort that you need to do it. But to do it, you must know how a thought is formed, what are the components of the thought, how you can be awake through chitta rather than the mind, so that you can move on to the next stage of prajna. And as I said, the body knows all what the mind does. So the body is waiting to wake up, to emerge, because the body consists of these tiny particles that arise and cease, and that's the one that arises with the eye of prajna. And that is where Dhamma is, and that is where Buddha is. And I said Dhamma is these tiniest particles that arise and cease, beyond which, if you separate those particles, if you try to destroy those particles, there will not be a particle left, and then you will achieve the state where there is no arising and ceasing, and that is called Nibbana. And that is seen by the eye of Brahma. So, to get to that, first you must see Dhamma, and then see Nibbana, and then Buddha. So, to see Dhamma, you need the eye of Prajna, because your normal eye cannot, and not powerful enough to see Dhamma level. And also, it only picks up collections of these arising and ceasing particles, which we call sankara in Buddhist terms. Is sankara. Sang means conglomeration, coming together. Kara means karanam, which means facts or knowledge. So small units of knowledge come together to form a particle, but it is not a physical particle. It cannot be measured. You cannot measure the length or the weight of it, but it is seen as a particle by the eye of prajna. That is why we call it particle, because there is no other name, but the real name in Buddhist circles is sankara, not sanskara. Sankara. San means the coming together of knowledge, units of knowledge. So the whole body is made of, the physical body part is made of your knowledge. The whole, whether it's an arm or a leg or a hair, everything is. Even a nail clipping that you uh, throw away also consists of knowledge. And this knowledge is the one that we are trying to unearth, recover from inside. And unfortunately, this mind, memory, the sense organ system has completely submerged it, completely covered it, masked it. And also it goes round circles. When one thought ends, another thought comes. When a thought ends, it becomes nourishment to tanha. It binds the body and mind together even more firmly, so that another thought can come. So this process goes on and on and on. And this tanha becoming stronger every time a thought happens is called in Buddhist circles samsara. Its actual Magadhi word is sayam saro. Sayam means by itself, saro means becoming nourished. So it nourishes by itself. So it's called samsara. So in this, people are talking about continuing in samsara, but the religions have given a wrong notion of this birth and the next birth and the next birth. Unfortunately, in the real Buddha Dhamma. A thought is defined as the rising and ceasing of a thought, also known as bhavo. Bhavo. The Mother term is bhavo. In Sri Lanka we call it bhava. I don't know what we call in Malaysia, but bhava means it's an event. It's an event. But unfortunately, in Buddhism, bhava is supposed to be meaning this life, and the next bhava is next life. But in fact, bhava means each event, and that is the disease that we all suffer from birth. In this disease, we continue to have thoughts whenever we are awake, and in fact, we are awake through a system of thought. In the process of system of thought, I said when impulse falls on the body or I, it just passes on to the mind and the mind wakes up. And that is Vijnana. So that system goes around cycles and cycles. And this cycle is known as, in Buddhist circles, Paticca Samuppada. That is a cause and effect cycle. If you see there's an object, so you see it, and then the cause and the effect, and then tanha becomes stronger, and then another one comes, it goes round and round. So at the beginning, this young lady said to everybody, Sukhi Hotu. Sukhi Hotu means, Sukhi means being cured. Hotu means be cured. So Sukhi Hotu means be cured. To be cured, you must suffer from an illness. And that illness is this arising and ceasing of the thought. As long as this illness persists and continues, then you will not be able to open this eye of prajna to see Buddha and Dhamma. So this disease called bhava, there is a cure for that as well. And the cure is listening to the truth without a thought by being awake through jnana, not vijnana, not through the mind, by being awake through chitta. And that is the medicine prescribed for this. And that is the way Theravada Buddhism explains how to see Buddha. So now it is so important for you to prepare. Try not to have any strong feelings about anything, and try not to go back to the past. And sort of be neutral. If you can, forget all what is in the memory, particularly the ones relating to me and religions. Then you might even do it yourself without listening to anybody else. Right now, so I explained how so important this preparation should be. And once you prepare, then move on to the stage of practicing how to be awake without a thought. Now, as I said at the beginning, you got to get rid of all the strong thoughts and notion of me. For that, you need to free your mind. Free your mind means you will not believe in anything. You will not accept anything as true or false. You only listen to somebody who wants to say something and understand what that person has said and not come to conclusions. And then your mind, at least your mind will be able to move further than the, the circle that or the covering that the religions have put upon us so that we can go and actually think beyond the religions. So from there onwards, you move on to the stage of trying and be awake, try to be awake without a thought. And I explained last time how to do that practice. You simply look at an object at a distance we often advise you to look at trees because there are trees. If you don't have trees in your area, if it's particularly if it's living in a flat or very crowded city limits, then you might have to pick some other object which you normally can investigate a lot. But here, what the exercise is, you look at it and not investigate it for about 10 seconds. And then after that, you look at the space between you and that object, preferably at least 20-30 meters away, and look at the a point in space. And then the reason for doing that is to get rid of this image, but still be awake. So if you say, I saw a tree, there's no tree after that when you look at, or it can be seen as blurred or anything, but you are not concentrating on that, you're not focusing on that. You're focusing on a blank position. And you lose the notion of I and only seeing remains. This is to prevent you from falling asleep because we are used to, if you stop thinking, to go to sleep. So once you train like that, then you will be able to later on get rid of the part of that seeing portion, and then be still be awake without sleeping. And then you will be awake through chitta. Now I will explain a little bit about chitta. Chitta is a very peculiar state where, like the mind, 50% of it, half of it, consists of these particles that arise and cease. Just like that, just like the mind, same speed. But the other half is illuminous. This the mind does not have. And we call it Prabhaswara. Prabha Asrava means illuminous something. And it has the capability to be awake through this luminosity. This is an advance. This is a step higher. It doesn't need an image to fall from outside through a sense organ to be awake, whereas the mind needs that image to fall onto the mind to become awake. Here you can be awake through this luminosity without an image on it. And that's the one that we use as a medium term option to move on to the prajna stage to see Buddha and Dhamma. So you train to be awake through chitta, through jnana. And if you can stay a couple of minutes without being disturbed, and I said that there are three levels. The second level, you don't have to look at the tree. You can start once you train yourself. You can start by looking at the space straight away. And then after that, you sit down somewhere and close your eyes. And when you close your eyes, you see darkness. And you should be able to be awake without investigating darkness so that you will not see light or darkness and still be awake. And then you are awake through chitta and you are awake through this luminosity. And then if you can be like that for at least a few minutes without being disturbed, you will find that when you are resting during your day-to-day life, occasionally you go through stages like that automatically. And then you know you are reasonably well trained. If it happens by itself without you making an effort, you are awake through chitta. Then you are ready to go to the next stage of listening to the truth without thinking. So how do you listen to the truth without thinking? And that is the one that has been lost in the history for over 2100 years. And that is why people couldn't become enlightened by listening, because that went underground. Only people knew only how to listen to the mind, not through it. So now we have opened this up, we have freed it up, and we have explained to many people, and they have achieved success through that. And I hope you will also be able to do this. And how would you do this? Now, to do this, I will very briefly. Now we are sort of gone over time because we started late. Very briefly, I'll tell you in a few minutes, in 2 3 minutes, how you do this. When you to understand how you listen without thinking, you must know how you do it with thinking. First, there are two ways of listening to the truth. One is through mind, other one is through chitta. When you listen through chitta, there is no person listening. It is not the mind listening. It's not the chitta that's listening. It's the sankara, or these particles that arise and cease that listen. They have, within inverted commas, we call, they have also ears. So basically, you are listening through tens of millions of years, because all these particles have the capability to listen. And that is wrongly mentioned as Dhamma Sravana in Buddhist circles, but it is not. Dhamma is not what that somebody person tells you to listen to. Dhamma is the particles that listen within your body. So it is the particles that listen. It's Dhamma that listens. Unfortunately, in Buddhism, Dhamma is mentioned as what somebody else tells you, either from books or from their experiences. That is not Dhamma. Dhamma is what is found within your body. And that is what you see through the eye of mind. So, how would you listen normally to through the mind? Through the mind, when you listen, you use, now when somebody speaks, he or she emits, passes on sound, words, and meanings. This is very important. Three things: sound, word, and meaning. When you listen through mind, you take all three in through your ears and then pass through the nerves into the brain and then project it to the mind. And then you uh, find out from the memory what it is and then understand. And then you analyze, you criticize, investigate, and then make up your own mind as to what it is. Sometimes you think it is true or false, and also put it back in your memory. And that is a system that is for your system to perpetuate. You have to put things in the memory, otherwise you can't progress. That is the wrong system. And in this system, when you listen through chitta, listening when the Dhamma in your body starts listening, you only, it's not you actually there, it's the Dhamma that listens. Dhamma listens only the meanings. It's called Artha in Buddhist circles. Artha means actor, actor means the truth. So if somebody tells the truth, it is what Dhamma listens, and Dhamma can hear only truth because they consist of the truth. Because I said it's knowledge, and that's the truth. Dhamma is knowledge, and that's the truth. So the truth somebody tells in the form of meanings will join with sankara or Dhamma because they also have the truth within themselves. We call it themselves just to explain to you, but there's no person there. It is just a particle. So if you have the habit of listening from your young days to the meanings of what they say, what people say, not take very seriously how they say and who said it, then you're well tuned to listen to this. Then it becomes easy because when you're listening at the time without a thought, you can't do anything because there's no you there. You have no control. You let Dhamma take the leadership, and that is why in Buddhist circles say always let Dhamma take the leadership, not the mind. Now, at the moment, it's the mind that controls Dhamma, which is the physical body. But once you get rid of the mind or relinquish the mind, then Dhamma becomes the leader, or the body becomes the leader, and then it will start listening. So that's the practical part of it, and then at some stage, maybe in a later occasion explain, suddenly you stop hearing, or Dhamma stops hearing, and then Dhamma starts to dissipate, and that's the time the tanha has become totally destroyed, and the body and the mind separates off, and what consists of what is the structure of the body, eye of prajna will see as these particles dissipate from you. So you will see that the so-called me who was there before is now crumbling into tiny particles and dissipating and radiating out from within. And that is seeing Dhamma. And of course, after in the next process, Dhamma will also disappear, and you see the next stage, which is the Nibbana, which consists of the pure knowledge without conglomeration. When it conglomerates, it forms Dhamma. Right, so we'll stop at that. I'm sorry we were late today. And if you have any questions, I'll take on from that, and we will discuss in future sessions further about the practice. We can't hear you. Guy, we can't hear you.
Hi,
No
so
sound.
sorry.
Now I can hear.
Thank you, Doctor, for sharing us the Dharma session tonight. We do not have any questions from the audience. So we shall conclude the session for today. So on the behalf of the monk and management of the Mahavihara, we would like to thank Doctor for your time and sharing Dharma knowledge with us. We would like to also express our gratitude to all our sponsors for their kind donations and all our audience for joining us tonight. Good night, everyone, and have a pleasant evening. Suki Hantu.
Thank you very much.